1 2 1 2 1 2. Still love.
It seemed to me he was in a world where he was expected to be off camera, if you will, the same person that he portrayed himself to be in his music. From an outsider, it seemed to me that in the world of rap music, if you weren't honest to what you were rapping about, you were a sellout.
Keeping my peace, packing my peace, smoking cess to deal with this inner city stress. I know I'm blessed, but these demons out the curse, man. Do anything that they can to try and hurt me. Good Lord, wherever happens to compassion and brotherly love, cause now there's hate in every action. I try to maintain, be a player in this game, but I seem to keep losing. Maybe it's the strategy I'm using, or maybe it's the friend that I'm choosing. Jealous associates guaranteed to cause confusion. Is it your goal to act true as an illusion? Develop my trust, they leave me stranded in a bus. I feel like pulling out my gun and busting on these fakers. 2-bit punks, perpetrators, and player haters. But I got to keep my eyes on the prize. Watch me bubble like champagne, niggas. Watch me ride, be all I try to escape it everywhere I go and try and keep my focus. But a world without hatred is like the projects without roses. No matter how high I get, I can't escape the sense of it. And all you hatred as haters always making me sick. I'm trying to find a place where I can go where hatred ain't allowed to show. Where everybody about money and they all try and blow. I'm trying to find a place where ain't no hating allowed. But I'm always seeing them face and hearing them hate ringing out loud. It's an average night and I got my windows rolled up tight. Blowing bow out the sunroof and not a hater in sight. But I'ma keep my third eye open cause I know them haters scoping, waiting to catch me at the light. Well, hope that they can leave me open. Proposition beating fast, but I know cats gon' still blast. So I'm lean back in my seat so I can't be seen through the glass. It ain't only the hungry dogs that I got to watch out for. 9 times out of 10, if it's dirt then it's set up by a hoe. And I know, so I'm careful on who I run with. Ain't got no time to be combined and no scandalous that shit. But everywhere I go, I'm hearing what sounds like shots from a Fofo. Passing the driver's side door. My niggas who sniff too much snow. And me, I'm just trying to blow. Separate my friends from my foes. And only fuck with niggas who understand the model is to show. So everywhere I go, I try to stay completely separated from those with hearts full of hatred for anybody that make it.
I really did believe at one point, up until I got shot, that no black person would ever shoot me. I was their representative. You know, I didn't have to fear my own community. You know, I was like, I represent them. I'm their ambassador to the world. They would never harm me. They would never rob me. They would never do me wrong.
That was coming to grips with anger just as he was. Thug life gave them a face, and he gave them a voice. But that voice often seemed to say two very different things, contradicting itself.
When I said thug life is dead, that does not mean that thug life is dead in the world. That just means that I have graduated to the next level, to be a player. Not a player of females, but a player of life. This game of life is a game, and you have to play it to the fullest. And I graduated, you know, I'm in college now, the college of life, you know? And I want my brothers to graduate too. I could easily just look down on you and go, them motherfuckers stupid, you know what I mean? I know something that they don't know, but that ain't me, that ain't never been me. When Thug Life was not out there and I was pumping it to you, I wanted you to know what it was like. And now I want you to know what the next level was like.
He outgrew the image of thug life, but he could never escape it. In the end, it consumed him, leaving only a man-made myth, a distorted reflection that only tells half the story.
I don't feel like what I did was so evil. I just feel like the way I was living and my mentality was a part of my progression to be a man.
So we can never determine where life begins or ends, but we can determine what we do in between. People who think about Tupac's life think about it with the beginning and the ending. But I don't think his life could be translated so easily because it was a mess, it was a chaos, it was a contradictory, paradoxical pursuit of, on the one hand, the pure sublime expression of artistic articulation, and on the other hand, it was about the valorization of a certain set of death-dealing impulses.
It was something in the eyes and the spirit in his eyes. through his eyes is the window.
To keep it real, to valorize the hood as only being about pimps and macs and hoes and the gutter, even though that was very necessary to elevate and edify that element. The unquestionable pursuit of that as the be-all and end-all of existence led to some death-dealing consequences for Tupac.
Unlike any other musical form, hip-hop demands its artists to do what they say. Tupac found himself fighting a two-front war, one for street credibility and the other for a moral center. In the end, he became a casualty of that conflict.
He just seemed like he was always on the side of the underdog, somebody everybody tried to mess over.
When an icon is born, it comes to us without flaws or dimensions. It fits on a t-shirt or magazine cover, and it washes out the reality of the man or woman it replaced.
It had to be something great, because everybody looking at only the greatness.
Only because death always ties up rather neatly what could never be resolved in life. And this is not particularly endemic to a person like Tupac. This goes with the territory of icons.
The icon that Tupac has become is no less confusing than the man. Some label him a cautionary tale, others a martyr. In the distant wake of his death, we still ask, what did his life say?
I believe it's that freedom, that thug nation, that, yo, I'm gonna get mine, I'm gonna get paper, I'm tired of being in jail, I'm tired of everybody telling me what to do. It's that rebel, that new generation wanna have that freedom, justice and equality in all walks of life anyway, you know what I'm saying, just busting through. And everybody look at Pac and say, man, that man, he did what he wanted to do.
Tupac serves a particular interest because he was a man who believed in his heart that he had a mission in life. And he pursued that mission with extraordinary zeal, with unquestionable passion, but also with reckless abandonment that led to some self-destructive choices. Now that he is gone, we're able to re-articulate, to retranslate the meaning of his life in neat form.
But to understand, we must first deconstruct.
There can be no black-white unity until there is first some black unity.
No in between. You're either free or you're a slave. He was a Black Panther. I believe that Tupac was a Black Panther in his heart. Of course, he had learned a lot from the mistakes that they made in the past, and a lot of the problems with their approach and how they weren't able to keep together. But he was the next generation of Black Panthers.
Masses of our people are in the streets.
The 1970s ushered in a new era of black nationalism within America, built on the memories of police dogs and fire hoses and of fallen leaders. It was an altogether new and different mindset.
We're not going to take the crap we took in the 1960s. We're no longer capitulating, we're no longer surrendering, we're standing up for ourselves. The 1970s was about a re-articulation of blackness. How do we recuperate and recover blackness in its pure form? So the afros, the focus on the black nose, the big black lips, the big black hips. Black is beautiful. Even James Brown gave up the conch and got an afro for a while.
Out of the bedrock of 60s disenchantment grew the Black Panther Party. Founded in 1966 in Oakland, California, the Panther Party came into its own in the 70s, offering intelligence and articulation to the anger of the urban condition. Bobby Seale and Huey Newton were the founders that gave it direction.
I know I can stand with this gun in my hand only 7-point-something feet from you because I've read the law.
Martyrs like Fred Hampton gave it a unified purpose. In the South Bronx, a young Afeni Shakur had fallen in love with the Panther ideals in 1968, throwing herself into their army. In 1969, she was arrested along with 20 others for allegedly trying to bomb several buildings in Manhattan. They were known as the Panther 21. In February of '71, she was sent to the Women's Detention Center in Greenwich Village, 5 months pregnant.
My mother was pregnant with me while she was in prison, and a month after she got out of prison, she gave birth to me. So I was cultivated in prison. My embryo was in prison.
Lasan Parrish Crooks was born on June 16, 1971. Afeni soon changed his name to Tupac Amaru Shakur. Derived from the name of an Incan chief who was torn apart by Spaniards, it translated as Shining Serpent, Thankful to God. Throughout his life, the relationship he had with his mother was his touchstone. It was rooted in an admiration for her strength and her struggle, but it was a bond that would be tested in the coming years.
You know, that's my homie. My mom's was my homie. We went through our little stages, you know, where first we was mother and son, then it was like drill sergeant and cadet, you know, then it was like dictator, Lou Country. Then after I moved out and I was on my own, came back and was like some prodigal son type of thing, where now, you know, she respects me as a man, I respect her as a mother for all the things, all the sacrifices she made, so she's really my friend. You know, it's like, it's not just me. I think all young black males and all Hispanic males, really all males period, but especially from that ghetto lifestyle, we have a deep love for our mothers because they usually raise us by themselves, you know, so you always feel closer to your moms. Even back in the day, they had, I always love my mama. It's been going on for years.
The question of Tupac's father is a more tangled one. While it's believed party member Billy Garland was Tupac's biological father, a local hustler, nicknamed Legs, became the man Tupac claimed as his father. Legs became the foundation for his thug persona. Their collective involvement and neglect had a far-reaching impact, with their dual influence foreshadowing the conflict at the core of what Tupac would later become.
Dualities presuppose the existence of strident oppositions that are pure. But the reality is that Tupac had thug in him and he had revolutionary in him, and both of them were equally vital to a certain social vision that got articulated in his lyrics. Early in his life, he tried to have the revolutionary impulse of black liberation traditions be front and center.
Tupac was raised to believe he was a soldier bred to fight a war. This radical tendency comes through early and often in his music.
And what he's done is that he's saying something in all of that poetry. People love art, they love that. So when you're listening to him, not only are you getting the artistic, poetic weight of his work, which is entertaining and beautiful, you're also getting his message and what it is that he had to say and what he's learned in his life and the lessons he's learned. He's always talking about these rules, and he focuses and he talks about certain things over and over again.
Then the reality is he began to identify with the hustler, with the thug, the person who had to use his or her wits to survive in the street.
Thug life is always going to be real to me, and it still is real to me.
The thug mentality Tupac clung to late in his life was an acknowledgement of where he was from, but it also became his prison, one that hip-hop holds many of its artists in. The worse it gets, the more you're loved.
The media went with that bad image, and I think it was hard for him, and I think it really hurt him.
I didn't create thug life. I diagnosed it. You know, just like if a doctor says, this is the AIDS virus, he didn't make AIDS, he diagnosed it. You know what I mean? He won't be held responsible for every AIDS case. You know, if anything, he's bringing you information on maybe finding a cure. I felt as though that's the same thing I did for Thug Life.
Beyond the bravado and the soullessness that critics key in on, there's an inescapable poverty that defines the thug mentality. It is contempt for being poor. And it's a contempt that grew in Tupac throughout his childhood.
I don't think we can romanticize away the incredible material hardship that Tupac faced.
Afeni's involvement in the counterculture made it virtually impossible for her to get or keep a job. At the same time, the party was beginning to unravel from internal and external forces. The message of equality and unity was quickly getting lost as it became every man for himself.
They believed in all the people having power and equally sharing access to material wealth. But what Tupac saw up close was the contradiction between the ideal and the reality. The consequences of her revolutionary activity was that she couldn't get paid, she couldn't eat, she couldn't survive, and the party wasn't taking care of her. And Tupac saw that contradiction. So his thug life was an explicit critique of a revolutionary impulse that couldn't pay the bills. Ironically enough, in the 70s at the same time, there was a parallel movement among the mainstream culture toward a culture of narcissism, meism. It was about getting mine at the expense of yours. It was about a hustler gangster ethic at the heart of American capitalism.
And it was only a glimpse. of things to come.
Mortgaging our future and our children's future for the temporary convenience of the present. To continue this long trend is to guarantee tremendous social, cultural, political, and economic upheavals.
Then what you get in the 80s is the political economy of crack. And the political economy of crack means that we began to have crack crimes, crack addictions. People began to organize their lives in these enclaves of urban terror called ghettos.
Reaganomics, Jesse Jackson said, took from the poor and gave to the rich. Its vengeful indifference began to splinter the urban community, which bore the brunt of the early 80s recession. In 1986, Afeni and Tupac moved from New York to Baltimore, where he began to tap into the arts as an outlet and an escape.
He did go to Baltimore School of Performing Arts. He learned a lot there.
He immersed himself into theater and began to read voraciously, but soon found himself again transplanted, this time to Marin City, California. His family, like so many others, was breaking under the Republican regime. Afeni the activist was becoming Afeni the addict.
Marin City, there's one way in and one way out. You pass the police station and the fire department, and then there's a liquor store. There's no grocery store in Marin City, just a big liquor store. And we called it the front back then. And then there's these ominous hills that sit on top of your head with the most beautiful Marin homes. So you get to be reminded every day of everything you don't have.
Music became his purpose. His early work was primitive and typical on the surface, focusing on material wealth. But there was also a political content in it that was lacking in most. It jumped out at the people who heard it.
I instantly knew that I was sitting in the presence of somebody so brilliant and so beautiful. He was among the greatest of literary artists in the making, and I knew this.
For inspiration, he needed only to look around him. The disintegration he fled in Baltimore was on display in Marin City. In black communities across America, crack had found a home.
Whether you believe the San Jose Mercury or not, whether you believe the conspiracy theory or not, the reality is that the ghetto was drenched with that. The government turned a deaf ear, if you will, and a blind eye to the enormous drenching of these urban terrains by this crack economy, which created hostility in black and brown families. As one person said, I think it was Joseph Marshall, crack cocaine did what 300 years of slavery could never do. It undermined and subverted the integrity of the black family by virtue of creating a commodity over which black people were literally killing each other to get access to. And Tupac had to see the bitter consequences of his own mother living the contradiction between black revolution on the one hand and its promise and possibility, and on the other hand the capitulation to the worst form of anti-revolutionary impulse there was, that is addiction.
Watching his mother fall from grace fashioned a drive in him, just as powerful as the one she had tried to instill in him in the 70s. He was consumed with rising above where he was, hungry for any knowledge he could get, or any edge he could gain.
You can't know Tupac without knowing how much he read, without knowing the library of books that he devoured. And this is not because of school, because he left school. He chose not to finish high school and to pursue his career. And Pac always had a book with him. I don't know that people know that.
The more he read, the more he began to believe he was a member of an expendable race being extinguished, and nothing was being done to stop it.
You and I can live beyond our means, but for only a limited period of time.
In one sense, the drug industry and the government turning its blind eye fed the rise of the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex means that black and brown people are being incarcerated at disproportionate rates to the larger white population for nonviolent crimes.
You can look at it with a 3 strikes law. You can look at it where they're building more jails. They're starting to sell jail space. You know, jail is big business. Believe me, I'm in jail. I see the big business. They charge you for your telephone calls. They charge you for disciplinary problems. Jail is big business. You know, you can feed a whole town off one jail. This jail is in the middle of a town that feeds everybody. Everybody works here. This is the main income. So if there was no criminals, nobody would work.
The prison industrial complex is being expanded enormously. The exponential increase in the prison population, now above 2 million people, half of whom are black and brown people, is an incredible index of the furious disregard of black and brown life at the hand of a government that doesn't need individual white or black people in its seat of power to control. The machinery itself is disposed against black and brown people.
When you start looking at it like that, you'll start seeing that it just don't weigh out to be in our favor. So we need to start figuring out another way. You got to start peeping the game. The game is the game of life. You got to start peeping how they're doing it. And if you see it, you can see the little signs that says that the guns are turning away from, you know, Europe and Russia and Iran and Iraq, and they're turning to us.
Seem like we all been fooled, you know what I'm saying? It's just, you know, do we really know what's going on? And
soon the government is going to make the young black male and the young Hispanic male the prime target of all their resources, and all their jail sentences and all their powerful weapons and technology will be the enemy. So unless we stop it now, regulate it, we're going to end up crashing against a wall. So if there's a way that you can get out of the game before it's too late, get out the game before it's too late. If you're going to be in the game and you commit yourself fully, then, you know, do what you can to give back to the community that you raped.
So to be the child of a revolutionary who was also poor, whose mother also was addicted to crack, who also had a father figure who was part of a thug tradition, Tupac barely had the capacity to be legitimate in the eyes of the very black people who began to see him later on in his life as a flashpoint and a lightning rod for enormous forms of contradiction. So he does represent not only the 70s and the 80s crack cocaine, he represents also the way in which black nationalism began to be much more focused on how do you get paid and get rich and use black capitalism as a means of subverting the system, as opposed to burning buildings down, throwing bombs in subways, and trying to interrupt the government's operations.
What I do, still big weapons, still on probation. Who are you? Cattle bust with hesitation. Is it true? You a rider? Just perpetration.
The ghetto became the source root, the major metaphor for Tupac that seized him by the throat.
Nobody really want to stay in the ghetto. We all want to elevate from the ghetto or clean the ghetto up, you know what I'm saying, have a nice place to live. So he always talked about the tragedies of the ghetto and the pain that came behind it.
But beyond being its translator, Tupac turned the ghetto into a stage, blurring his musical fiction and allowing it to bleed into his reality, constantly crafting visions of his own end.
He said that. If I die tonight, he said that. In Outlaw, where I said some dudes in a mask coming to shoot me, I said it, you know what I mean? And it ain't easy. I'm talking about being in jail, you know what I mean? And the judge not letting me out on bail. I mean, I said all of these things, and then it happened.
The ghetto has a lot of different experiences, and you have to go through the ghetto and make it through those different experiences, you know, be a soldier. And sometimes you have to be more aggressive to fight the enemies that's coming to you.
There's a culture of death that circulates in the ghetto that's very destructive in many ways. The attraction, the addiction, the fascination with the limit, with death, with the end, and with the closing of the infinite by the finite acts of homicide, of suicide, that are so rampant in the culture, both metaphorically and literally.
This obsession and apparent glorification of violence provides critics with their strongest arguments. Proponents argue it's only a reflection. Within Tupac's body of work, he acknowledges both sides, but points out time and again that hip-hop is built on theatrics.
My attitude was fuck it because motherfuckers love it. He tells you, it's all there. He says, I'm a man of many acts. Please understand my history, a man of many acts. He tells you, but he doesn't come out and say it to the media, but he throws it in his in his work.
I definitely feel for the mothers. I understand there's always going to be drug dealing, I understand there's always going to be violence, but we just need to regulate it so that we can at least have like a peaceful zone where we can all be cool, you know, or else we're going to all die, we're going to all be destroyed. And it's cool to talk about it, to recognize it, but I mean, how many times can we say the same thing? You know what I mean? I know it's a way for us to get out the hood, but what do we run into? You know what I mean? Once we get out the hood, shit, they don't want us over there.
To counter the venom and aggression, a mournful side began to emerge in the 90s. It focused on the pain that the cycle of violence caused. Tupac would drift from one tone to another, provoking cries of hypocrisy from the critics who saw only a man fixated with his own death.
There's a culture of death that was deeply destructive that he paid tremendous homage to through his kind of elegiac poetry. He talked about it constantly. He referred to it constantly. People understood that Tupac was in love with death.
It was romanticized again and again, draped in metaphors alluding to mythic Italian gangsters and mad dictators. There was a seduction to it, and it sold. The simple truth is, if he didn't sell records, no one would listen to anything else he had to say.
I know it's not good. If anybody speak up against violence, it'll be the brother that got shot 5 times. I got shot twice in my head, all up in. Trust me, violence ain't cool. And they know violence ain't cool. Ain't nobody out there with a gun saying it's cool to be shooting people. It's just, you know, it's certain situations where there is no way out. But there are situations where we can find a way out. But until we find that way out, we can't say not to live this lifestyle.
In the mid-90s, Tupac was the poster boy for the young black male. With that stage, he was able to articulate the ghetto condition. Ironically, the negative press that validated him with his fans put him on that stage. And his West Coast provincial mentality was what the gang culture thrived on.
My set, my group, my turf, my neighborhood, my geography, which is wrenching in its own consequences, and also ringing a very fatalistic change on Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said geography is destiny. So what the ghetto does in terms of the Crips and the Bloods, what it does is valorize that ghetto as destiny.
You know what gang violence is, mostly, and the people don't want you to hear this? Somebody shoots your family member, so of course you retaliate. You know what I mean? Same thing the U.S. does, except nobody even shot their family members. You know, they see somebody bomb a school and all these people get killed, so the United States feel like, ooh, that's messed up, we gotta go show them who's the real killers. That's the same mentality these gangsters get. America is the biggest gang in the world. You know what I mean? Look at how they didn't agree with Cuba, so what was the cut them off? That's what we do in the street, we block things off.
Like a movie, gang violence is scored with hip-hop. Conversely, some hip-hop feeds off of gangs as a source. But where the rest of the world saw an absolute evil, Tupac envisioned a positive spin. A notion rooted in the militant organization he saw in the Panther Party. Self-preservation.
I think gangs can be positive. It just has to be organized. And it has to steer away from being self-destructive to being self-productive. I think this country was built on gangs. You know, I think this country still is run on gangs. Republicans, Democrats, the police department, the FBI, the CIA, those are gangs. You know what I mean? The correctional officers. I had a correctional officer tell me straight up, we the biggest gang in New York State. Straight up, you know what I mean? So this whole country is built on gangs. We just have to not be so self-destructive about it. Organize, you know. If you got somebody dealing drugs in the community, make them pay for the community center. If they don't want to listen, then you turn against them. You know what I mean? If we so strong as gangs and as hustlers and as G's and as thugs or whatever, it should be no rapes, there should be no violence, there should be no gunshots in our community unless we the ones sparking it, unless we doing that to somebody that's trying to infiltrate or break down our community. All this money that we make in the streets, we should bring it back and turn it back into the community. We need to have block parties again. We need to have leagues, you know, summer leagues and football teams and basketball teams. We need to start taking care of our own. That's how it can be positive. It can be positive when we start sending these young G's to school, sending the younger G's to college. You know, let them come back and build something. I do believe that there's a piece of liability on the drug dealers and the gangsters and the gangs and all of that, but these are not scholars. You know what I mean? We pay taxes. When the people in LA, after the rebellion, when we stopped and there was a truce, nothing happened. Did we get any jobs? No. Did we get any relief? No. But every time there's a flood, an earthquake, or a thunderstorm, America will give mad millions to somebody because their house broke down. They don't care if we stop the violence or not. They don't care about gang violence. You know what I mean? Every time that Bosnia gets shot up, any place gets shot up, they send them a whole bunch of millions in food and packages from Somalia, everywhere. Everybody getting food but us. So we don't want the gang violence to stop. So they can't ask me to tell them to stop the violence, because I can't tell nobody who's hungry what to do unless I'm ready to feed them. Then I'll tell them what to do.
with jack money. Police wanna take my scraps from me. All they catching is cats and half dummies. Niggas wishing I was getting caught, but not now. Interference, then you getting shot, but blah, blah.
I know when I was young, the way they described jail, I couldn't wait to get to jail. Straight up. That's where you get the game. That's where you got more soldiers at that build you. But now that I'm here, this is not the spot. I know everybody go to jail, come out and say, this ain't the spot. This is not the spot. You got somebody that tells you when you can get up, when you can shower, when you can do this, when you can do that. You know, they can speak to you any way they want to, and you got to accept it. You can die here, you know what I mean? Just yesterday, a dude was murdered. He wasn't in here on no murder beef. This dude was in here on a drug beef. You know, he's gone. He's dead in jail.
Before Tupac was tragic, he was famous. And before he was famous, he was in trouble. Trouble gave him his fame. After a 1994 allegation of sexual misconduct and a shooting which nearly took his life, he was sent to prison and forced to look inward and live day to day.
Well, the first 8 months, I spent in solitude, 23 hours a day locked down, reading, writing. I read a lot of good books. I read a lot of Maya Angelou's books, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, listen to music, you know, different types of music, calm my soul. Dionne Farris, she really got me through a lot of this time.
The days creep by so slow, he started living in reverse, visiting episodes from his past, venturing into a whole new creative form.
I wrote a script called Live to Tell. I used to always add things to like poetic justice. I added my own words to poetic justice. I wrote whole scenes in Above the Rim. In Juice, I used a lot of my own words. This was the first time that I actually sat down and write a whole script.
He had determined years earlier that his war was to be fought using the weapons of media. Beyond the vanity of it, he recognized the power that film had to reach large numbers of people. He also saw that true creative power was wielded from behind the camera. Already in his arsenal were acting and rapping, but there was ambition for much more.
Oh, no doubt. You can look forward to me doing movies, writing movies, starring in movies. Soon I want to direct them. You can look forward to me doing records, bringing on a whole bunch of groups. I already got a few now. I just signed to Death Row Records.
Forced into a focus by unfilled time, he began to fixate on his purpose. But stuck in the moment behind bars, music was nowhere to be found at first.
Everybody's like, oh man, he's in jail now. I know he's gonna come out, he's gonna have a bomb album, but it's the opposite. Prison kills your spirit, straight up. It kills your spirit. There is no creativity, there's none of that. You know, I see a lot of it in other prisoners. They got artists in here, they got poets in here, you know, but as far as me, it just killed my spirit. I couldn't write. I only recently started writing, and besides the script was just like flashing back to my old life, so it didn't really take too much for me to be inspired by. But in terms of writing music and lyrics, I didn't have that, I couldn't do it. Now, I just, you know, finished a couple of tracks, so that's good, but it doesn't really inspire creativity.
One motivating factor was those he perceived had put him where he was. Not just those who had put him in prison, but also the New York crew of rappers that he saw as the ones behind his 1994 shooting. The East Coast-West Coast war, which would define the second half of his career, was taking shape.
I just thought about how it would change. What would I do? How could I make them sorry that they ever did this to me? You know what I mean? How can I come back like 50 times stronger and better? And also for the people out there, we need to start supporting not every black person that go to jail or get into trouble, but the ones that you know didn't do it. You know what I mean? I feel like people know I didn't do this. They saying right now, they still say Tupac Shakur, rape charge. I'm not convicted of no rape charge. I want to make that real clear. My charge was sexual abuse, forcibly touching the buttocks. That's what they charged me. I'm innocent of that, but that's what I'm in jail for. You understand?
In 1995, Suge Knight posted a $1.4 million bail for Tupac. He was to become the jewel in Death Row's crown. His time in Clinton Correctional would be a badge of honor, but also a memory where the mystique of prison life meant blunt reality.
Do not come to jail. Do everything you can to make it around the system, over the system, or in the system. But don't come to jail. It's not the spot. It's little 17-year-old kids up in here, you know what I mean? With 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds, and I'm surrounded by dudes doing life that's 60 years, that's as young as me or younger. You know what I mean? That made a mistake when they was young kids, and they stuck forever. I'm a messenger, you know, I come and I tell you what's going on. If I went to a club, I'll tell you the club is popping, or the club is sorry. I came to jail, I'm telling you straight up, this ain't the spot. It's dirty, it's filthy, it's like you an animal. You know what I mean? And it's just not the spot. No man don't want to be here. No man or woman wants to be here. When I said I was living the thug life, believe me, it was all real.
There's a kind of fascination with the thug.
As sure as thug life is tattooed across my stomach, it will always be a part of me.
Tupac Shakur represented at once the expression of the evil that needed to be resisted and the need to resist that evil. This is why people were so upset with him.
Just recently, this lady wrote me named Clovis Benjamin from San Francisco. And she was writing me, telling me about her nephew had just been killed. The day before he died, he was like, I'm going to get Tupac's new tape. So she wrote me to tell me, you know, they played Dear Mama at the funeral, boom, boom. And that touched me, you know, and I was like, what can I do? Is there anything I can do? Let's do some concerts, let's do some organizing. I was like, if she's strong enough to keep going and make a difference, then I can be strong enough to make a difference. And that kind of focuses me back on what I should be doing and not let me like veer off back into the lifestyle I was living, because it's real easy to do that.
On the one hand, he could articulate somebody dying, somebody wanting to die, somebody believing he or she was going to die, and the suffering that that encouraged. On the other hand, he could so hopelessly, nihilistically, some might argue, engage in the very things that would lead to their death.
A lot of people try to put out the bad things, try to, you know, say he did this. Who really know, you know?
These opposing forces, rooted in his two-headed father and mother, left Tupac in a constant state of contradiction, both within himself and to the rest of the world. The two wills formed a destructive combination.
In the sense that within Tupac himself was both the possibility of the solution as well as the contradiction of that solution.
Once you get people exploring who they are, their emotions, their love, their pain, their power, then they start examining who they are and how they contribute or serve humanity, how you're either problem or solution, and you make a conscious choice.
While his life tended to be problematic, he was always looking for that solution, a way to marry his two worlds, the thug and the soldier. His conclusion? That they were one and the same.
Now, if we do want to live the thug life and the gangster life and all of that, okay, so stop being cowards and let's have a revolution. But we don't want to do that. Dudes just want to live a character. They want to be cartoons. But if they really wanted to do something, they was that tough. All right, let's start our own country. Let's start a revolution. Let's get out of here. Let's do something. But they don't want to do that. They want to pimp our communities and portray this image that they know we all can't survive and make it. And that's what I saw. Now, if I was dumb, it'd be cool. It wouldn't be my fault. But it's my fault because I'm smarter than that. I do have another way I can say this. It doesn't mean that I don't feel that way no more. It just means that let me be as smart as them or smarter.
Tupac began to believe that you could both be a thug and a revolutionary, and that the greatest revolutionary was the thug. So he never gave up revolution, he transmuted the terms. The transmuted terms of revolution now were thug life. Thug life was about elevating the ghetto dweller, the blood, the crip, the person who didn't have much in life, and making them the center of an agenda to speak about the pain of black life.
This agenda was aimed squarely at the ghetto condition. The end was to humanize a group of people that had been marginalized by society. The single mother, the street soldier, the drug addict. Where outsiders saw glorification, those on the inside saw understanding.
It's a unity, a thing of unity that he's bringing to all people that seem like it elevates it, cracked the atom. He's bringing it in, not only myself, many other soldiers is feeling that.
Hip-hop at its best, as Tupac helped us understand, was a critique of the blindness, the invisibility, the refusal to acknowledge the legitimate social oppression and suffering that these people endured.
There was a glimpse of elegance or nobility in that suffering, there to uplift rather than to tear down. As we get further away from September 7th, 1996, the broad strokes of his troubles are slowly giving way to the subtlety.
Now people are beginning to, whoa, we have something here. It's clicking. You know, that people are like, well, we better, you know, pay extra attention.
The blueprint for Tupac's details are found first and foremost in his lyrics.
Just the other day, I got lynched by some crooked cops, and to this day, them same cops on the beat getting major pay. But when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the pigs to knock the blacks out. Oh, so what we see is a subsidization of our own oppression by virtue of tax monies that are being funneled through mainstream, legitimate structures to then, in one sense, do away with the very people who support the government.
But his social commentary was always flanked by the violent underscorings and sexual overtones that blanket the genre. This created an army of pundits and activists who assailed him for what they saw as insincere rhetoric.
No matter what these people say about me, my music does not glorify any image. My music is spiritual if you listen to it. It's all about emotion. It's all about life. And where other rappers, not to diss nobody, but where other rappers might, you know, paint a perfect picture of themselves, or, you know, whatever, I tell my innermost, darkest secrets. I reveal myself in every one of my records, from Dear Mama to Shed So Many Tears. I tell my own personal problems.
Starting in 1992, conservatives stood front and center, using the name Tupac Shakur as a synonym for everything from black-on-black crime to hatred towards women.
I don't understand how Dolores Tucker and Bob Dole and all these other dudes, how they can say like we got gangster music. I never even classify my music as gangster music. And if you really, I know they haven't listened to my tape. I know somebody geesed them up to go attack Tupac. And now what it does is they attacked a few famous rappers, and now them themselves are famous. Bob Dole want to get elected, which he won't be. Dolores Tucker just want to get a name, which she won't find, because it'll fade. I don't see how she can say she's helping the black community and strike back at us. We are the black community. You know, we are a part of the black community. But as far as the lyrics, you can look at lyrics in my album, any album, and I'll pick out lyrics and I'll shut them up on all their points. You can look at my recent album, Me Against the World, the title song, Me Against the World, where it has lines that says like, can you picture my prophecy? Stress in the city, the cops on top of me. The projects is full of bullets, though bodies is dropping. There ain't no stopping me. Constantly moving while making millions. Witnessing killings, leaving dead bodies in abandoned buildings. Can't reach the children cause they illin'. Addicted to killing and the appeal of the cat pilling. Without feeling, but will they last or be blasted? Hard-headed bastard. Maybe he'll listen in this casket. Now how does that glorify thug life or gangsterism? I don't see how that does it. I don't understand how that could be, how you could say, you know, we're the cause of all this violence.
The scrutiny, which included congressional hearings and protest, left Tupac the very caricature he was attempting to deconstruct. And with the media, the view was always one-sided. Forever the thug.
Because they don't know, you know?
First, I'm gonna say, I don't feel all the adoration or whatever that comes from the fans. I feel like a lot of people put different standards on judging me than they will put on the next man. You know, one rapper can say, I'll kill you, I'll cut your heart out, I'll put this gun to your pregnant belly and blah, 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 and he get all love. All I'll say is, you know, we don't need to be letting these BITCHs run our life. And I'm hating females, you know what I mean? And this other person could be the man. So I don't feel it.
Hip-hop culture is really an internal debate about bourgeois values and conservative traditions, and the refusal to acknowledge those as the only viable means by which black people can articulate their political and social beliefs. So hip-hop culture represents that, and Tupac especially was representative of that incredible fertility of conflict that always goes on within black cultures throughout the globe.
Blocks, corners, streets, my concrete niggas doing dirt to eat. Grinding in Pomona, Long Beach, Inglewood, every single hood.
I'm gonna say like the Spanish dude in here always tell me, I don't got no friends. I don't got no friends. You know what I mean? I got supporters, people on my side and people on the other side. I ain't gonna blow up nobody's name, but as proven by this false rape charge, as proven by the gunshots, as proven by a lot of the comments you read in the news, you know, I'm just one man, so. Constantly in a defensive stance, the initial message and the goals that came with it began to get lost in the haze of enemies and conspirators by 1994. The persona he had created in his music began to take center stage to fend off the threats. I've been getting the blame for everything that Thug Life ever did. Everything, anybody can say Thug Life and then it always comes back to me. I done had policemen get killed and I get blamed for it, and you know, all type of violence and I get blamed for it. In November 1994, while entering a Times Square recording studio, Tupac was robbed of his jewelry and shot 5 times. It was never seen as a robbery though.
in Tupac's eyes, and it was a setup.
They shot me. Straight up. I just kept thinking, they really did shoot me.
At the top of his list sat Bad Boy Records, fronted by the notorious B.I.G., his former protege, and Sean Puffy Combs. Enter the throat chapter of his life, which would prove to be his last, completed his cycle as he finally gave in and became what he beheld. Lashing out with verbal retributions loaded with threats, the missiles flew back and forth, from one coast to another.
Well, I believe everybody have a spiritual side, no matter if it's a good spirit or a bad spirit, because they can be haunted by either or. He was haunted by an evil spirit as well as something that he tried to shake off, and he expressed a lot of his positive spirit to the people, you know what I'm saying? But everybody, you know, is like a battery to me, is from my understanding of life. Negative and positive energy is a balance. How do you balance it and how do you deal with it in your life? I believe with Pac, he tried to deal with those spirit, you know, the best way he can, coming up with, you know, from his foundation and from the understanding and from the diction of whatever he read. That's what, you know, the Creator gave to him.
The great writer Howard Thurman, who was also a preacher and a mystic, said that one of the ingenuities of black slave culture was the ability not to reduce one's hopes, dreams, or visions to the level of the event, which is one's immediate experience. The immediate experience may be nasty, may be nefarious, may be evil, may be problematic, may be hurtful, but one must foster, encourage, manage the future vision that allows one to escape the immediate consequences of despair. Hopelessness occurs when one has the inability to imagine a different future.
And you know, Tupac always said, I see the future and it's hopeless. He said that, and that makes me worry because he was somebody that I really respect what he has to say, and I think he does have that ability to see in the future. I think he did have that intelligence.
Tupac represented both sides of the coin. On the one hand, he represented extraordinary hopefulness. When you talk about keeping your head up, when you're talking about searching for black Jesus, as he did with the Outlaws, we're looking for somebody who smokes like we smoke, drink like we drink. A black Jesus, not somebody too perfect, he said, but a saint in the ghetto to whom we can pray. One thinks immediately of that great passage in Hebrews that says we have not a high priest who is incapable of identifying with our own limitations. So in one sense, Tupac was the secular external articulation of an ongoing religious debate about the possibility of identifying with a God who became what we are.
What he was searching for was something rooted in the despair that he knew. Not a blonde-haired, blue-eyed embodiment of perceived white perfection, but something more tangible and relevant to him.
We're searching for black Jesus. Black Jesus meant for him that figure who identifies with the downtrodden and the downtrodden. The black Jesus is a new figure, both literally within the literary traditions of black response to suffering, but also religious responses to suffering. The black Jesus is not the Jesus of history, or if it is the Jesus of history, it is the Jesus who has never been talked about. It is an irreverent creation that most people who talk about Jesus would never recognize. We don't want a Jesus who's too perfect. Wait a minute. We thought Jesus was the definition of perfect. No. Somebody who smokes like we smoke, drink like we drink, a God who smokes marijuana, a blunt-spoken Jesus. That is not the catechism of the irreverent. That is pure blasphemy.
Within that blasphemy, something else is at work. A fundamental attempt to make God more accessible. Zealots are outraged when they hear this notion, but the ideals are primarily Christianity, a human link from God to man.
Tupac Shakur is deconsecrating what has essentially been a sacred world. That is a blasphemy worthy of the auto da fe in the Spanish Inquisition. People would hang Tupac, and did, metaphorically, lyrically.
I think I've been attacked more than I deserve, but that's all good to me, because I always been a fighter, always been a soldier, always been a struggler. Can't nothing stop me but death itself. You know what I mean? So as far as what I have to say to other people, I don't really want to come off like I got the answer, I'm finna teach y'all. It's not like that. I don't got the answers. I just try to speak about things that affect me and about things that affect our community. And I try to do it from a viewpoint of the watcher. Sometimes I'm the watcher, sometimes I'm the participant, and sometimes it's just allegories or fables that have a moral or have a theme, underlying theme in it.
To me, he's seen something very deep. He was able to see into his dreams and the way his life would be.
What many think he saw was his own icon after death. In seeing himself as a black leader, he couldn't shake the religious connection to black activism from the past, and the way most had met their end, by violent means.
I think about Tupac as a kind of extraordinarily irreverent natural theologian who gave voice to a black quest for meaning in the midst of suffering.
Within music, there's a chance to connect with people on a basic level, either to give meaning to suffering or a reason for being. Tupac looked to the greats of all colors and the methods that made their work connect.
My inspiration for writing music is like Don McLean when he did American Pie, he did Vincent, like Shakespeare when he does his things, like deep stories, you know, like Raw Human Needs, Lorraine Hansberry with Raisin in the Sun. I want to do that to my music. That's how I like to do it. Marvin Gaye, you know?
Like any other facet of black culture, hip-hop is rooted in religion. So just as with his social critiques, he eventually indicted the religious community.
I went to church, but they underhand it. I don't understand it, right? So he's already saying that there is some contradiction between the ideal of serving the masses by virtue of being religious and seeing them being taken advantage of by not well-intending priests, preachers, and so on.
Even the long-standing hip-hop creed of keeping it real found its origins in the religion of struggle from the past.
I mean, I don't have to say I'm keeping it real. You can listen to the music and go, whoa.
Keeping it real really drew from the same religious passion of Orthodox black religion. I want to live the life I sing about in my song was a Mahalia Jackson quote, was a quote of the gospel culture that Tupac distanced himself from. But he embraced it by replacing it with the thug life. Thug life, as you know, for Tupac meant the hate you gave little infants, F's everyone. Nigga meant for him never ignorant, getting goals accomplished. So to the acronyms that he derived from thug culture and from black street culture and from ghetto-centric reality, he endowed with a kind of religious passion that edified those people who were both the thugs and the niggas and gave them a transcendental force because now they were cooperating with the best impulses of the universe.
You know, I'm giving it my best shot to do right by the community. Y'all do right by me. Support me, I'll support you. If I feel like I ain't got no support, then, you know, ain't no need me being out here putting myself on Front Street. If I feel like I'm getting supported, I go all the way. Just like I went all the way for Thug Life, I go all the way for the community. But as soon as y'all turn y'all back on me, I'll turn my back on y'all. We won't have nothing to talk about.
The reason Tupac represents both the thug, the nihilistic denial of potential meaning in human existence, and, on the other hand, a kind of ghetto saint whose very edifying transcendental meaning is able to resonate universally is precisely because he understood the yin and yang, he understood the good and the evil, but more importantly, he understood the life force that was both bubbling up within black culture and also contradicting itself at the same time. And thug for him never simply was literal. It was always metaphoric. It was always representative. It was always symbolic. And in that sense, Tupac continues to be a most powerful lightning rod for both the forces of edifying revolution and thug life that grounds that revolution in the economic and material conditions of those who are most acutely poor.
Measure a man by his actions fully, from the beginning to the end. Don't take a piece out of my life or a song out of my music and say this is what I'm about, because you know better than that. And if you take me out the game, you're not gonna wanna see the next one. Trust me. Take me out the game, you're not gonna wanna see this next dude, because he ain't gonna have no compassion.
He was transformation in flux, constantly rearranging his identity, constantly changing the pieces of the puzzle of what it meant to be a human being, and constantly in quest of his best understanding of what it meant to be humane in the midst of chaotic realities around him. Whether or not Tupac's life was translatable before he died, like any other great icon, probably very doubtful.
To translate it now, though, you need only look at the impact he has had and continues to have worldwide.
People in Amsterdam were waiting in line trying to get the album. And you know, if you just check the internet, it's all there. That's where it is. You just go to these websites and you see how much he's being talked about and how much, you know, how many hits these Tupac websites are getting from, you know, internationally.
The reason he's able to be globally consumed, so to speak, is not simply because of American capitalism, whose tentacles stretch worldwide. People from all over the world were attracted to Tupac precisely because he was a person who was looking for the right way to articulate the possibility of humanity in the midst of difficulty.
He did it, you know, he shaked the haters and brought the positive out, you know what I'm saying, and other people, and you can see the way he shined at the end.
It's still going on, it hasn't changed, you know.
His pursuits range from hedonistic to virtuous, but whatever their motivation, there was an honesty evident, even when he failed.
That pure pursuit of authenticity in that regard was universally and globally accepted. People felt his spirit. They felt the love that came from Tupac. They felt the passion in his lyrics. They felt his ability to identify with them.
To me, it was like a Martin Luther King thing, you know what I'm saying? Like when King said, yo, I might not be there with you, but, you know, we're gonna make it. Pac, you know, he was saying, yo, we're gonna make it no matter what. I might not be there. I might see myself in the casket, this and that, but we're gonna make it no matter what.
I believe that he is a world leader, and that now, after he's no longer here, people will slowly begin to recognize his role as a leader and how his lyrics and his art and everything he left us will do the work. Because many times egos get in the way, and with every great leader, a lot of their work is recognized after they're gone. But 60 million record sales let you know how strong Pac's voice is.
Even though he passed on early. He's left his work, and his thoughts and his ideas are all there.
He's left us such a hugely varied body of work that whatever we identify with, we can find in Tupac. That is both his genius and the danger. Any human being traveling any path can identify with him and can tie into his work. The danger of that is that the fierce contradictions can be used as an example of what Tupac did not really mean.
Doing it to him. I'm saying that in front of me is so great, but if I don't concentrate on it, I wanted to get to that spot.
His pieces never add up to his whole, and the confusion only grows with time. In Tupac Shakur, if nothing else, there is humanity on display. There will be a debate on the value of his legacy for years, but that debate is his legacy.
Tupac, by no other measure, was the greatest rapper. He didn't have the flow of Snoop Dogg. He didn't have the poetic intensity of Rakim. He didn't have the mathematical flow, as Mos Def calls it, of Biggie Smalls. But he had a heart that was huger than any. He had a transcendental figure that tied up with the world spirit, and he could channel and tap into that world spirit and at the same time allow people to have access to it through his own body, through his own belief, through his own poetry. And that's why I think he's rather much more successfully translated now in death than he ever was in life.
It's just an icon, you know what I'm saying?
Mamas, don't let your sons grow up to be rap singers, sports stars and entertainers and gat aimers, imported cars, crack slingers and track danger, lead a house doors, come back strangers, now that's anger, threats and constant attacks change, feds can't wait to hang us, once we young, black and famous, dang, somewhere I traded in the gun for a book, still the sum I mistook, come in the slum, I'm a crook, my crimey moms hate to see me knocking on the door for a son, knowing it's dirt in the street, and we gon' get into some, but I ain't looking for none, can't be a bum, money, I took it and run, look what it's done, made me harsh, bitter and cold, with a heart made of gold, cause somehow a nigga still got soul, still got dough, blessed with Captain, let this real style roll, off my tongue, make you niggas feel my flow, on every block, corner, street, my concrete niggas have it working, heat, grinding in Compton, Watts, Carson, Venice, Beach, SC, blocks, corners, streets, my concrete niggas doing dirt to eat, grinding in Pomona, Long Beach, Inglewood, every single hood, give it up, bring your hood. South of Florence, west of Vermont, where we earn nine. Fuck square bitches that turn high. On the phone serenading the ones that learn not to get involved with a hustler that drink and burn pot. South Central for real, ain't no stars here to chill. Just when the dope run out, see them slumming to get a refill. Or the slugs to swap meat, shopping for cheap deals. Recognizing street steal, so keep bills concealed. I, on the other hand, graduated quick. The big payoff got me infatuated with lifestyles in excess, lifestyles in latex, female execs with paychecks for safe sex.
I'm sitting here hoping that we can find some way to kick it, even though I got your digits, gotta struggle to resist it. I slowly advance till it's my chance not to miss it. You blow me kisses when he ain't looking at your heart's tooken. My only wish is that you change your mind and he get shook. Wanna take you there, but you're scared to follow. Come see tomorrow, hoping I can take you through the pain and sorrow, let you know I care. And someone's there for your struggle. Depend on me when you have needs or there's trouble. I wanna give you happiness, or maybe even more. I told you before, no time to waste. We can hook up at the store. Can you get away? I can't.